Okay.
You can start, Dr. Barnard.
Let's just give you some free coupons. For dollar off coupons.
Oh, well, thank you.
Enjoy now and share with your clients.
Yeah, can we hear?
Tom, yes, we can hear
Yeah,
you.
we can hear you, Dr. Bernard. Are you ready for the start?
Yeah.
Okay, we're
I'm
ready
ready.
to start at any time.
Would you like me to go ahead and jump in?
You can't hear or see me.
All right. Give me another thumbs up if it's okay for me to go ahead and start. All right, very good. Well, let's go ahead and begin. Thank you very much for sharing a little time with me through the wonders of modern technology. I'm here in Washington, D.C. at my office, and I'm wishing that I were with you in Florida. So anyway, thank you for allowing me to share some time with you. When we talk about what foods can do to make the world a better place, we think about a lot of things. A lot of people nowadays are talking about climate change, and they know that changing our diet can be enormously helpful there too. And people who have a heart for animals know that there's nothing kinder that you can do for animals than to leave them off your plate. And as a doctor, I have to say I have been astounded by how changing your diet can improve your health. And I'd like to talk about all these things. If you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen and share some images with you. For me, the page turned back in 1990. That was when Dr. Dean Ornish wanted to see if we could do something that up until that point had been viewed as impossible. He wanted to see not can we just prevent heart disease, but can we actually reverse it? He wanted to see if that ugly looking artery that you can see at the bottom, if that could be cleaned out and look more like that healthy artery at the top. And he wanted to do it not with drugs, not with surgery, but with simple steps anybody can make. So what he did is he asked people who had heart disease to do 4 things. Number 1, vegetarian foods. Now, why would you use vegetarian foods for a heart patient? Why would you do that? Okay, no cholesterol, right? Plant foods don't have cholesterol. Almost no bad fat. Okay, good. Secondly, half-hour walk every day. Third, manage stress, which is why he didn't do the study here in Washington, D.C., where I live. And fourth, avoid tobacco. That was the whole program. No drugs, no surgery, nothing. And after a year, your average person had lost 22 pounds, 10 kilos. Their cholesterol had dropped 24%, but their bad cholesterol, or LDL cholesterol, had dropped 37%. That was huge. But what made the medical headlines was that everyone had an angiogram before and after the intervention. An angiogram is a scan that shows you those the narrowed arteries that are going through to your heart. And what he could show is that the arteries were starting to open up again so much that you could see a significant difference in 82% of participants with no medicine, no surgery. This was unheard of, but it was clear. And the Lancet published that in 1990. And then 8 years later, the JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, publishes long-term findings, which showed that the likelihood of having any kind of heart problem was dramatically reduced by this intervention. Let me show you what this looks like. This is a slide that Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, whom some of you may know, gave me. This is an angiogram. It's a scan of an artery, and that should normally be a nice curving white line. That's the left anterior descending artery that gives blood to your heart muscle. But it's all crinkly. That's because atherosclerosis, like rusty pipes, is narrowing the passageway through the artery. This was actually the artery of another surgeon. This was a surgeon who had severe heart disease, and he could not have heart surgery. The disease was too extensive there, and he couldn't tolerate statin, cholesterol-lowering drugs. So with no other choice, he went on a low-fat, totally vegan diet, no animal products. And after 32 months, this is that artery. Now, I'm hoping you can see that. I'm hoping that my little photo strip isn't in the way, because what I want you to see is that that artery has healed. Now, you know, if you cut your hand, your skin will heal. The Band-Aid doesn't heal you. Your skin cells have in their DNA a first aid kit that says, we've been cut. we can bridge that gap. We can stop the bleeding. We can heal the skin. It's not perfect. There will be a scar, but the skin can heal. If you break a bone, the cast doesn't heal you. The cast just holds the bone still to allow them to do their magic. That fracture can heal because your bone cells have their own sort of first aid kit that allows them to heal. Well, what we started to realize is that the arteries can heal. But in the same way that your skin will never heal if you keep picking at that cut, and a broken bone won't heal if we have a loose cast so the bones keep wiggling around, that you can't heal that way. And your arteries cannot heal if we keep spraying them with particles of cholesterol that came from the chicken wings and Velveeta that we're eating. But when we get that out of the diet, we get out of the body's way, and the healing process can begin. Let me walk you through some numbers to show you the rationale behind this. These are animal products: beef, chicken, salmon, cheese, eggs. As you'll notice, they all have cholesterol. They all have saturated fat. That's the solid fat that causes your body to make cholesterol. Now, these are plant products: beans, rice, broccoli, sweet potatoes. Plants don't have cholesterol. Look at that, the big zero in that column. And they have almost none of that bad fat. So it's no big surprise that these foods allow the body to heal in a way that never happened before. Doctors used to say, well, don't eat so much red meat, switch to chicken, switch to fish. Well, look, I mean, is that really any big change? I don't think so, and especially if cheese is still in your diet, you're just asking for it. If that cheese were any worse, it would be Vaseline. When we get the animal products off our plate, the healing begins. Okay, so my research team was inspired, and we wanted to see if this kind of diet would also work for people who didn't have heart disease, but just wanted to lose weight. We brought in 64 women into the study. They were all after the age of menopause. They had all done every kind of diet to try to lose weight. And what we asked them to do was to either try a low-fat vegan diet. And now when I say vegan, I don't mean a person from the planet Vegas. I just mean a person who's eating no animal products at all. Half of the group was randomly assigned to that diet. The other half was randomly assigned to a more conventional diet. And we asked them not to change their exercise patterns because we wanted to see what the diet alone could do. And it was a 14-week study. So the vegan group was asked to eat fruits and grains and vegetables and legumes. That's just a fancy word for beans and peas and lentils. And when they looked at what the foods they might eat, they were horrified to think, my goodness sakes, if I eat pancakes and oatmeal and cantaloupe and rye toast, I'm going to gain weight. And then it got worse. Somebody else discovered that the only rules were that you just had to avoid animal products and keep oils really low. That's all we asked them to do. And somebody discovered that Twizzlers are vegan. And we didn't even have a rule against that. We just said, no animal products, keep vegetable oils low. I'm not saying Twizzlers are healthy food, but they actually weren't forbidden. And what we found is that after 14 weeks, the control group lost a little bit of weight, but the vegan group lost much more, about not quite 13 pounds in 14 weeks. And after 2 years after the study, the plant-based group continued to lose weight, whereas the other group did not. Okay, let's shift gears now. What I've said is that a plant-based diet, as part of a healthy lifestyle, can heal heart disease. It can help us to lose weight without counting calories, without worrying about carbohydrate, without even exercising if we're unable to exercise. But that opened the door to a new discovery. And this is what I'd like to share with you for the rest of this talk. Everything in your body is controlled by hormones. This is not something we think about very much, but hormones are the directors that go around and tell your body what to do. A hormone like insulin is made in the pancreas, and it tells your cells to take sugar out of the blood and use that sugar for energy. Estrogens and testosterone are sex hormones that direct your reproductive organs for what they ought to be doing. Your thyroid gland makes thyroid hormone that gives energy to your body. And there are many other hormones. We haven't really thought much about them because we thought, well, there's nothing I can do to change what they do. Wait a second. What we have discovered is that by eating food in certain ways, you can control how your hormones work. Fasten your seatbelt. I'm going to show you how this works. Now, I want to start with insulin. And first, let me just show you what insulin does in your body. You see this big purple oval? That's a muscle cell. And muscles run on a fuel called glucose. Glucose is a simple sugar. You know about glucose. And that sugar goes into the cell and it gives it power. Now, the problem is the muscle cell's membrane doesn't let the glucose in. The glucose tries to get in, but it bounces right off. And you need a key. And that key is insulin. And that insulin key is made in your pancreas, which is an organ right behind your belly button. And it goes through the blood to attach to the surface of the cell. And once it arrives, it stimulates the opening of little channels to let the glucose inside. Okay, that's great. Everything's working fine. What could go wrong? Well, what could go wrong is this. I grew up in North Dakota. And my dinner looked like that. And my lunch looked like that. And my breakfast looked kind of like that. And I ate a lot of fatty stuff, as did most people. Yeah, there's a lot of fat in these foods. So, wait a minute. We're talking about diabetes. Isn't diabetes about sugar? And insulin is about controlling sugar? What's fat have to do with it? Let's go back to the cell. I ate my chicken wings, or my Chinook salmon, or my roast beef, and the fat particles from these foods got into the cell. And as fat particles build up inside the cell, something happens. Now, doctors don't like words like fat because it's got only one syllable. So we would like to call this intramyocellular lipid. But what it actually is fat inside the cell. And now when the insulin key arrives at the surface of the cell is filled with fat. The insulin key can't work anymore. It can't signal. Nothing happens. And the glucose molecules are stuck. They can't get inside because the key is not working because of all that fat coming up the works. What can I do? What if I decide I'm not going to eat animal products right now? There's no animal fat in my diet anymore at all. There's no chicken fat. There's no beef fat, nothing. And what if in addition to that, I keep oils really low, so I'm not eating greasy food? The fat in the cells starts to dissipate. The fat starts to leave your cell. And when the fat leaves the cell, the key can work now. That insulin key can open up those channels and let the glucose come inside. And now everybody's happy. What I am saying is that the insulin resistance that came from eating fatty foods can be reversed. And this means that diabetes can get better. Let me share with you one frightening research study that was done at Yale University back in 1996. They brought in volunteers, young, healthy people, and they hooked them up to an intravenous line, and they pumped fat into their bodies intravenously. And what they showed is that their insulin sensitivity, their body's ability to respond to insulin, can be shut down not in days or months or years, but in hours. That fat infusion, that lipid infusion caused their insulin sensitivity to just tank. Here's my point. If a person has diabetes because their insulin's not working anymore, that comes from foods that they have been eating that caused fat to get into their cells and shut down insulin's action. You can do this not with an insulin infusion. You can do this with a meal. Researchers brought in volunteers, gave them palm oil, and found that their insulin sensitivity fell just from a meal, from one single meal. Okay, so people have imagined that diabetes, that high blood sugar, comes from eating sugar and sodas. I'm not saying sodas are healthy food, but I'm going to say that the cause of diabetes is not a soda. It's probably Velveeta. Cheese, meat, fried foods, junk, bringing all that fat into our bodies. Okay. In 2003, the National Institutes of Health gave my research team a grant to test a better way to tackle diabetes. We brought in people who had diabetes type 2, Half of them went on a portion-controlled diet. That's a conventional diet. The other half went on a vegan diet, a plant-based diet. Let me show you these in particular. The portion-controlled diet meant limit calories to lose weight, keep carbohydrate fairly steady, and limit bad fats. Now, the vegan diet or plant-based diet simply said no animal products, keep oils low, and favor low glycemic index foods. Don't freak out about that technical term. Low glycemic index just means, let's say white bread. If you eat white bread, your blood sugar is likely to rise. That's high glycemic index. If you switch to rye bread, it's a little more gentle on your blood sugar, pumpernickel even more so. So those are lower glycemic index. So no animal products, reduce oils, but don't worry about how much carbohydrate you're eating, but do eat the healthier foods, the low GI foods. Okay. And what we found is that hemoglobin A1C, which is our #1 measure of blood sugar control, well, it improved in the portion control group. They did better. But in the vegan group, their improvement in A1C was 300% stronger than the portion control group. In other words, the improvement in blood sugar control was better than you'd see even with oral medicines. And this revolutionized the treatment of diabetes. Let me share with you the case of an individual who started this study. He was 35. He'd had diabetes for 4 years. He also had excess body weight. His blood sugar was high, his blood cholesterol was high. We call that dyslipidemia. And he had erectile dysfunction. And he said, I got to get this under control because my grandma had diabetes, my grandpa had diabetes, his own father was dead at age 30. He said, if I don't get my diabetes under control, I'm going to go blind. I'm going to lose a leg. And so he had been treated so far with metformin, which is a common diabetes drug, and a statin for his blood sugar. And he wasn't doing so well. He weighed 276 pounds. His A1C, which ought to be below 7, was 9.5. His total cholesterol was too high. His bad cholesterol was too high. And he had symptomatic erectile dysfunction. What we asked him to do was avoid animal products, minimize oils, and favor low glycemic index foods. He said, I'll do it. 3 months later, he had lost 25 pounds. His A1C had dropped from 9.5 to 7.1, and his erectile dysfunction went away. And at 14 months, he had lost almost 60 pounds. His A1C had now dropped to 5.3. His cholesterol was better, and his erectile dysfunction was still gone. The thing to pay attention to here is 5.3. A1C is the main test that we use to track your blood sugar control. And a level of 5.3 is not diabetes. It's not pre-diabetes. That is a normal A1C. And when I was in medical school, I was taught that diabetes doesn't ever heal. Once you have diabetes, you'll always have diabetes. It can't go away. But here was a man on no medicines who had had diabetes for 4 years, but now had an absolutely normal A1C. And what we just started to discover is that in the same way as your skin can heal from a cut, and your bones can heal from a fracture, and your arteries can heal from years of abuse from hamburgers and chicken wings, diabetes can heal. Now, it's different for everybody. And it's best if you get to it right away rather than waiting for 20 years. But when people follow a diet that helps clean out their cells and lets their insulin work better, they have got a shot at reducing their medicines, maybe getting off them completely, maybe even having this disease go away. Okay, and it's not just insulin. Insulin's a really important hormone, but we have other hormones too. Let's talk about estrogens, the female sex hormones. I was sitting at my desk one day. My phone rang, and a young woman called and said, she had terrible cramps, menstrual cramps. Many women have cramps, and for some, maybe 1 in 10, they are off the scale. I cannot go to work today type cramps. And that was her situation. And she said, could I give her some painkillers to help her to function? And I said, yeah, I can definitely give you some painkillers. But as she was describing her symptoms, I started to wonder, how do we not just get through this week, but how do we prevent this from happening next month and the month after that? And so I suggested something to her. Let me share with you my thought process on this. This is the uterus in the middle of the screen, and you see the ovaries off to the side, and they're connected by the fallopian tubes. And every month, that inner lining, that little pink lining in the middle, it thickens up in anticipation of pregnancy. And if there is too much estrogen in the blood, that lining will thicken up more. And so what I was hypothesizing was happening in her was that she had too much estrogen activity in her blood, and that was causing an extra thickening of that endometrial layer. And that when that was happening, at the end of the month, the endometrial layer would break apart and release prostaglandins that cause pain. Now, there's another possibility, and that's that you have endometrial cells, not just lining the uterus, but they've escaped. They're outside the uterus, on the outside of the uterus, or they're on the ovaries or fallopian tubes, or even on the intestine. And that's called endometriosis. And so that's another thing that's also fueled by estrogens. So I decided to suggest something to her, that she might change her diet. Now, I wasn't making this up. Researchers at Tufts University had already shown that diet could change estrogens. They brought in 48 women. They put them onto a metabolic ward where there's no McDonald's, and they controlled what they ate. And they tried different kinds of diets. Some were low fat, reducing fat from 40% down to about 20 to 25, or some were very high in fiber, increasing fiber from, say, 12 grams a day to 40 grams a day. But what they found is that just reducing fat caused estrogen levels to fall. Just increasing fiber did the same thing. So as this young woman was telling me her symptoms and said, I've got terrible pain, I was hypothesizing that this was caused by too much estrogen, either within her uterus or outside the uterus, endometrial implants, one or the other, and that if we could reduce her estrogen, maybe she'd feel better. So I suggested something I don't think any doctor had ever suggested to a patient at that point. I said, let me give you painkillers for 2 days, but let's do an experiment for the next 4 weeks. Are you up for that? And she said, absolutely. What can I do? And I said, no animal products and keep oils really low. You can see what I'm doing here. I'm saying without animal products, everything she's eating is a plant. So not only is there no animal fat, but also everything she eats has fiber in it. So it turns out to be a very low fat, very high fiber diet. And by minimizing oils, there's not much of any kind of fat in the diet. And she said, I'll give it a try. And what she discovered is that her pain went away. And it never came back unless she loosened the diet. So I thought that was remarkable, but we decided to do a study to see if this was true for other women. We brought in 33 women, and half of them did the same diet. And the other half took a supplement that was actually just a placebo. And then after 2 cycles, 2 months, they switched. The diet group started the supplement, and vice versa. And what we found was that basically it worked. This diet reduced the pain intensity, it reduced the pain duration, it reduced PMS symptoms like behavior change and water retention and difficulties concentrating. These all got better with the diet group. And what we were finding is that by making these simple diet changes, getting away from animal products and all the fat that's in them, and bringing in the plant products and all the healthy fiber that's in them, getting away from the greasy stuff, we could control estrogens. Let me share with you a case of an individual who did exactly this. This is Catherine. Catherine grew up in Louisiana. She was an Air Force aerospace engineer, and she was shipped to Iraq in 2003 to build military bases. And if you're working hard and you're in a war zone, I got to tell you, you don't really gain a whole lot of weight. But eventually her tour of duty came to an end, and she went back home to Louisiana. And her family was convinced that they ought to make up for all the foods that she had been missing when she was over in Iraq. And I got to tell you what she missed. Cheese, mac and cheese snacks. A friend of hers actually gave her an entire case of 48 boxes of mac and cheese dinners, which she ate every day for 48 days. I'm not making this up. Well, she gained weight, as you might imagine. And she also developed endometriosis. That's that condition where the endometrial cells are starting to crop up around the abdomen like little raisins. They swell, they bleed, they scar, they cause pain, and they can lead to infertility. Her doctor tried all different treatments for her, painkillers and hormonal treatments, and nothing really worked. And finally, the doctor said, well, you know, we could just do a hysterectomy, just have your uterus removed, have everything removed. You're going to feel better. Well, Catherine was 27, and she and her husband were kind of newlyweds and not so eager to say that, well, they would never have children. She said, well, is there something other than a hysterectomy that I could do? And the doctor said, well, I hate to break it to you, you're almost certainly infertile anyway, because of all the extensive disease that you've got, all this endometriosis damaging your ovaries and fallopian tubes. You may as well just have the hysterectomy. She was convinced that she had no choice. And so she agreed to have the hysterectomy. But she couldn't have it for another 6 weeks. And during that interim time, somebody taught her about the diet that we had been using. It was a vegan diet, no animal products, very low in fat, and she put it to work on her own. Now, it was a little awkward at first, learning how to make foods that didn't involve cheese, but she learned, and she started to feel a lot better. She lost weight, her energy came back, and she noticed that her pain was getting better and better and better, but it wasn't entirely gone. And the days went by, and as her surgery approached, she thought, well, I'm much better, but I still have some pain, so I think I'll just have the surgery and be done with it. So she went to the operating room. They put a gown on her, laid her on the table, anesthetized her, and she went out. An hour later, she blinked her eyes open, and she was in the recovery room. And the doctor was there. And he said, Catherine, I have to tell you something. I opened you up. I looked inside with a laparoscope. And it was amazing. Your endometriosis is pretty much just gone. The only reason that you have that residual pain is that you had a lot of scarring where the endometriosis used to be. And that caused adhesions. So that caused pain. So all I had to do was free up those adhesions. That's all I did. I didn't do the hysterectomy. You've still got your uterus. It's all still there. I didn't do the hysterectomy. I have no idea how this happened. How could this endometriosis go away? And her mother was in the room there. Her mother said, she went vegan. Well, the doctor said, stop. Food does not cause endometriosis. And there's no way a diet change could make it go away. This must be a miracle. Miracles happen every day. Well, I want to praise that doctor for not taking out her uterus. But he forgot something. Endometriosis is fueled by estrogens, and diets fuel the amount of estrogens that are circulating in your body. You can control the amount based on what you're eating. So it turned out Catherine lost a lot of weight, felt better than she felt in a long time. She never had the hysterectomy, and it turned out she wasn't infertile after all. There are her 3 kids. And she decided to dedicate her life to helping other women to regain their health, to take power over their diet, and in turn, to take power over how they feel from day to day. Wait a minute. Cheese. She loved cheese. Does cheese have hormones? Well, cheese comes from a cow. And I'm going to tell you something that's kind of disturbing, but it's true. Cows don't make milk. Cows don't make milk until they've been impregnated. And the 9-month pregnancy that they have results in birth. And then after they give birth to a calf, then they'll make milk. Now, this is not done in a very pretty way, just very briefly. Every glass of milk that you ever had, or every slice of cheese you ever had, came from a cow who went through this procedure. Some farmhand arrives at the farm, they chain the cows by the neck so they can't move, and then they stick their left hand up the cow's rear end. Yes, that's right. They put a glove up to their shoulder and insert their hand into the cow's rectum all the way up to the elbow, and through the rectal wall, they can feel the uterus. Then they take their right hand and take what looks like a knitting needle and jam it through the cow's cervix and insert some semen that they took from a bull. Now, they are not volunteers, but they're not going to object because she's chained by the neck and they're going to impregnate her no matter what she wants. And 9 months later, she is going to give birth. And even though she didn't ask to be impregnated, when she sees this little baby, yep, I got to tell you, there's nothing cuter than a little newborn calf. They look totally confused. They're all awkward and they try to stand up in the hay. And the mother looks down at her baby. And the baby looks up at mom. And she starts to clean her baby. And you can see the mother-infant bond kicking in. And she's caring for this vulnerable, fragile little being. And all the farmhands gather around and they say, that gets me just every time. But then they realize something. Wait a minute. We can't let the baby nurse because that's our milk. We're going to sell that milk. We don't want the baby to have the milk. So what they do is they take a wheelbarrow and they put the calf in the wheelbarrow and they take the calf away from the mother. Now the mother knows that this is happening. She will follow. She'll say, that's in her own cow way. That's my baby. Can I have my baby back? And then eventually the gate will just slam in her face and she will stand right there and she will cry out for her baby. There is no bond in nature stronger than the mother-infant bond. But if the calf drinks the milk, we don't have any to sell. We don't have any to make an ice cream. So we're going to take the baby away. And if that baby is male, he will be killed soon to make veal that can be sold to a restaurant for people who have a taste for that kind of thing. And if the calf is female, she'll be raised without her mother. She'll never see her mother again. She'll be put into an isolation hut where she'll be fed milk replacer until she is old enough to have somebody's hand up her backside, and they'll impregnate her. This same procedure happens every year to every cow on every dairy farm until she's about 4. Now, in nature, a cow will live to be about 20. But on a dairy farm, by about age 4, the dairy farmer says, you're not producing quite as much milk as you used to. I think I'll do better to milk your daughter. And the mother cow is put on a truck and sent to an unusual place that she's never seen before. She feels somebody grab her left leg and hoist her up to the ceiling and slit her throat, and that's the end of it. A lot of people won't eat meat because they know it's unethical. You're killing a cow, you're killing a chicken, you're killing a fish or somebody. But they'll drink milk because they think nobody died for that, did they? Well, the sad truth is that they kill all the cows on a dairy operation. They just impregnate them and separate them from their calves once a year until about age 4, and then they're all dead. I know this is kind of creepy to talk about, but the reason I'm talking about it is that once people know what's actually happening to put these foods in grocery stores, maybe we don't want to choose them anymore. We want to maybe make a different choice. And from the standpoint of hormones, when that cow is pregnant, they don't stop milking her. She's producing milk from her previous pregnancy. They're impregnating her again, and they keep milking her well into that pregnancy. And that means that she is making estradiol because she's pregnant. And that estradiol that is in her milk gets into your cheese or yogurt or ice cream. Yeah, let me be clear. Every glass of milk you ever give to your 8-year-old son or your 7-year-old daughter has estradiol in it from that cow, especially from the cows who are pregnant. Yes, we are feeding hormones to our kids in dairy products, okay? There's no such thing as hormone-free milk. Am I cheering you up? Researchers have taken a big interest in this because of breast cancer. Researchers at the Adventist Health Study looked at a very large population of Seventh-day Adventists. The reason they study Adventist is that it's a researcher's dream. A very large population of health-conscious people, virtually entirely non-smokers and teetotalers, and very good research participants. And in the Adventist Health Study 2, they looked at milk intake, that's the x-axis, from none to a quarter cup, half cup, 1 cup, 2 cups, 4 cups a day. And on the y-axis here, going up vertically, that's breast cancer. And that's right. The more milk the women were drinking in the Adventist Health Study, the higher the risk of cancer. And you could say, I knew it. Because you're drinking estrogens with every glass of milk, or you're eating them with every slice of cheese. And estrogens fuel breast cancer. That's right. But the beauty of this is this gives us something that we can do to reduce our risk of breast cancer, and that's to throw out the dairy products and raise our children without cow's milk products. All right, let me shift gears. We've talked about heart disease and weight control. We've talked about diabetes and estrogen function. Now what I'd like to do is to go to the other end of the reproductive window and look at menopause. Vasomotor symptoms of menopause. That means hot flashes. You're at the board of directors meeting. You're 52. You're giving a presentation, and about 10 minutes later, the room suddenly becomes 180 degrees, or at least it feels like it, and you break out into a sweat. That's a hot flash. It'll be gone in a minute or two, but you feel terrible. And if it happens at night, you wake up in a pool of sweat, and it really makes your quality of life just tank. Now, researchers noticed something interesting. In Japan, back in the 1980s, when the diet was mostly rice-based, without any dairy really, and not much meat. There was some fish, but it wasn't a meaty diet like in the United States. Hot flashes were rare. 15% of women had them. They didn't even have a word for them because they weren't really very severe. But the Japanese diet changed. McDonald's came in. KFC came in. And this rice-based diet pretty soon became more of a burger-friendly kind of diet, and vasomotor symptoms became more common. By around 2000, about 42% of women had them. Breast cancer rates doubled. Diabetes came in. Waistlines started to expand. Well, what's going on? Why is it that the traditional Japanese diet was somehow protective against hot flashes, and as it westernized, it became a reason to have more symptoms? Well, the first explanation came from soybeans. Japanese women consume tofu. They consume tempeh. They consume miso, soybeans themselves. And soy has something called isoflavones. Isoflavones are natural compounds in soybeans. Genistein, daidzein, glycine. They get part of the credit for the reason that people who consume a lot of soy products have less risk of breast cancer. By the way, let me repeat that because you might have heard the opposite. Women consuming the most soy, like tofu or soy milk, women consuming the most soy have reduced cancer risk compared to women who don't eat soy. Okay, soy is a cancer preventer. But also, these soy isoflavones, we believe, might help prevent hot flashes. But that's not all there is to it, because in countries where people don't consume soybeans, they also seem to have not much problem with hot flashes. I'm speaking of the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. If you flew to Cancun and got in your car and drove 2 hours west, you would be in a town called Valladolid and a little town next to it called Chichimilá. And researchers interviewed more than 100 Mayan women. In Mayan culture, they consume a healthier diet than people do in Omaha. And the researchers soon found that they didn't have hot flashes. They didn't have any symptoms of menopause really at all. It was no big deal. Well, wait a minute. Are they having rice and soybeans like women in Japan? Well, they do have a grain. It's not rice. The grain in the Yucatan Peninsula is corn. And they do have a favorite bean, and the favorite bean is not the soybean. It's black beans. And they eat a lot of vegetables. This one is called la chaya, and you'll still see it today. The culture has changed a lot. There's now Walmarts in Cancun, but they sell corn and beans and la chaya too. So our research team decided to look at what might actually be helping women to stop hot flashes. We began something called the Women's Study for the Alleviation of Vasomotor Symptoms, the WAVES study. And we brought in 84 women. They all had hot flashes, and half of them went on an experimental diet, and the other half were in a control group with no change. And what the diet consisted of was a plant-based diet. That means vegan, no animal products at all. Minimizing oils. This is going to sound pretty familiar by now, doesn't it? And third, a half a cup of soybeans every day. That was the whole program. Why would we do that? Okay, because in Japan, when they were doing well, in Mexico, when they were doing well, it was mostly a plant-based diet. So we thought, Let's do it all the way plant-based. And if soybeans were helpful because of those isoflavones, let's make sure to include them. That was the rationale. And what we found, first of all, the controls didn't lose much weight. But the people in the vegan group, they lost weight like crazy. Over 12 weeks, almost 8 pounds. Okay, that won't surprise you. But when we looked at the hot flashes, they were reduced by 88%. That is huge. That's about as good as hormone replacement therapy. And this was done with just healthy foods. Now, we also found not only were the vasomotor symptoms, the hot flashes, reduced more in the diet group compared to the control group, that was also true for psychosocial symptoms, like how you felt, what your mood was like. That improved more in the diet group than the control group too. And the same for physical symptoms like headaches or even sexual symptoms. All of these things seem to improve more in the diet group. Okay. Now, I had mentioned that soy reduces the risk of breast cancer. Let me come back to that because this is important. When you talk to people about this, they're going to say, I heard soy has hormones in it that are going to cause cancer. In 2008, there was a meta-analysis of 8 prior studies in Asians and Asian Americans. And what they found was that the women consuming the most soy had a 29% reduced risk of breast cancer compared to women who tended not to eat soy. Similar findings were produced in women who already had cancer. Those women who had a cancer diagnosis in the past, but now were eating a lot of soy products like soy milk or tofu. Their risk of dying of their cancer was cut by about 25% or even 30%. Let me repeat that. If a woman has been diagnosed with cancer, if she's had breast cancer and she's hoping, I hope it never comes back, her risk of having that cancer come back and kill her will be reduced significantly if she incorporates soy products in her diet. And if her well-meaning but ill-informed friends or doctor or somebody says, I wouldn't eat soy if I were you, they are putting her in the highest risk group, that red group there with the highest mortality. Soy products reduce cancer risk and they reduce the likelihood of dying of cancer. Okay, now why is this? We've heard that these isoflavones attach to estrogen receptors. Well, it turns out that there are 2 different kinds of estrogen receptors. And estrogen receptor alpha, that's the one that seems to be connected with cancer, but the isoflavones attach preferentially to estrogen receptor beta. It's like in your car. You've got a gas pedal, you've got a brake. One's right next to the other. They have exactly the opposite effect. The gas pedal makes you go. Your foot goes on the brake, you stop. You've got alpha estrogen receptors. You've got beta estrogen receptors. Think of beta as the brake, and the isoflavones step on the brake and help protect you against cancer. Okay, let's talk practicalities. I want to show you how you prepare soybeans in case you're so inclined. Edamame, delicious, but those are babies. Those are juvenile soybeans. They're not making a lot of isoflavones yet. They're delicious as appetizers. You can have them. But if you want a little more isoflavone power, wait till you have the mature soybeans. You can buy them. You go on Amazon, you'll see them. This is Laura brand, non-GMO soybeans. There are many brands. You'll find lots of them. And all you do, you plug in your Instant Pot and you put the soybeans inside and you pressure cook them for 40 minutes. Make sure they're nice and soft. You don't want them hard. They should not be al dente. They should be nice and soft. Now, if you want to, you can just soak them overnight and boil them like regular beans on the stove. That works perfectly fine too. Very easy. Okay. Now, once they come out, put them in portion bags or little Tupperware boxes so that you can have a half a cup each day. If you've got hot flashes, this is going to be your medicine. Use them like pine nuts on your salad, or you can add them to a soup or whatever, but make sure you get your half cup each day. Now, if you want to, for extra credit, once they come out of your pressure cooker, you might want to roast them. You don't have to, but it's kind of fun. Put them on a baking sheet, cover the baking sheet with parchment, put the soybeans on top, stick it in the oven. Set your oven for 350, cook them for an hour, make sure they're completely dry when you take them out. And once they're out of the oven, season them however you want. Put some salt on there, some cayenne pepper, some garlic, anything. And you can put them in a bag there. If they're totally dry, you can travel with them. It's kind of like dry roasted peanuts or something like that. Very, very, very nice. Or if you want, You can just buy them already toasted. If you go on to the Laura soybeans website, they sell toasted pre-roasted soybeans. Very handy. Okay, so you don't have to have these, but if you want to knock out hot flashes, 3 steps: vegan, low-fat soybeans together. It is like medicine. Now, by the way, there are a lot of soy foods, and they all have isoflavones in them. But the reason that we focus on this whole soybeans is that a half a cup of soybeans has a lot of isoflavones. If you did it with soy milk, you'd have to have about 8 cups of soy milk to get the same amount of isoflavones. So that's why we tend to push the soybeans themselves. Okay. Now, when you talk to friends, there's also all different kinds of diets. Some people say, well, go Mediterranean. Some people say, well, a vegan diet's a whole lot better. And that's, I guess, what I'm saying too. But let me also say, I wonder if you could do both Mediterranean and vegan at the same time. Let me show you what I mean. Ansel Keys was a University of Minnesota researcher who coined the term Mediterranean diet. He was at work in Minneapolis one February morning, and he was looking out the window thinking, why am I here? Why am I not in beautiful, sun-drenched southern Italy? And he actually went to Italy, and he fell in love with a little town called Nicotera, which, this was the 1950s. The economy was not super robust at that point, and they had a relatively low-fat, mostly plant-based diet, although not entirely plant-based. And so as time went on, people started to study Mediterranean diets, and they started to codify what it meant. It said mostly plant foods, minimally processed, have as your dessert, not ice cream, have it be fresh fruit, and don't use butter to cook, use olive oil. You can have dairy, but keep it low. You can have eggs, but no more than 4 a week. Red meat, okay, but not a lot. And you can have wine. So you could see it's kind of like halfway toward vegan. Well, a lot of people, when they're prescribed a Mediterranean diet, they don't care what's in it. They just like the idea of being in Tuscany. Well, researchers have actually put this to the test. The Predimed study was done in Spain. They had more than 7,000 participants. They were at risk for heart disease, and most of them were overweight. What they asked them to do was either have that Mediterranean diet that I just described, plus olive oil every day, or a Mediterranean diet plus nuts every day, or no big changes, just a control group. And what they found was, well, when you looked at whether you died or not, there was some suggestion that the oil group might do better, but not a lot. That little p-value you see, p equals 0.15, that's got to be below 0.05 to be not just chance. So it looked like it might be favorable, but it could just be chance alone. The researchers were not too impressed. Well, except if you do a combination of, do you have a heart attack? Do you have a stroke? Do you die from cardiovascular disease? Any of those things, they showed that there was a reduction of about 14%, maybe 23% relative risk reduction in the olive oil group or the nut group. So it wasn't a huge improvement, but it was there and it was real. And so that has led people to prescribe this kind of diet. Now, on the other hand, the people didn't lose weight very well. The weight changes there. Gee, nobody lost even a kilogram. That's terrible. They didn't lose it much more weight really than the control group. So our research team here in Washington, D.C. decided to do a head-to-head test of a Mediterranean diet and a vegan diet to see how they compare. What we did is we brought in 62 people. Everybody was overweight. Everybody wanted to lose weight. Half of them were randomly assigned to a Mediterranean diet. The other half were assigned to a vegan diet. After 16 weeks, everybody switched. The Mediterranean group went vegan. The vegan group went Mediterranean. And every week they met with a dietitian. They either met with a dietitian who taught and believed in a Mediterranean diet and could teach them the Mediterranean diet, or a dietitian who followed a vegan diet and was able to teach that too. So they got good support for their respective diet. And here's what the results were. Let me show you body weight. First of all, the Mediterranean group at first thought, what a wonderful indulgent diet this is. We're having olive oil and fish, and isn't this cool? Wait a minute. We're not losing weight. their weight loss was really slow. Now, the vegan group, that's the green line here, something very different happened to them. At first, they were happy to discover that a vegan diet didn't mean that you had to acquire a taste for folk music, and you didn't have to wear tie-dyed clothes. It just meant you're not eating animal products. And the weight loss was rapid. After 16 weeks, we asked everybody to stop. Take 4 weeks off and just go back to your old-fashioned diet, whatever you were eating before. After 4 weeks, jump back in, and now the Mediterranean group went vegan. And suddenly their weight loss kicked in big time. But the group that had been doing the vegan diet was now asked to stop being vegan and start doing a Mediterranean diet. And they noticed something troubling. Their weight started to climb. They started to put back the weight. And they were angry, in fact. Many of them said, why are we doing this? I don't want to do this Mediterranean diet. I was perfectly happy on the vegan diet. I don't miss chicken wings and cheese. But we asked them to stick with the Mediterranean diet for reasons of science. And many of them said, I can't wait for this study to be over so I can go back and do the vegan diet that helps me to lose weight. Bottom line, Mediterranean diets are not effective for weight loss. When we look at cholesterol, Mediterranean diets are also not very effective for lowering cholesterol. This is total cholesterol, and a vegan diet drops at almost 19 points. Mediterranean diet about 3. LDL cholesterol is bad cholesterol, and their same story. A vegan diet is much more effective. That shouldn't surprise you because the vegan diet doesn't have any cholesterol in it. It doesn't have any animal fat in it. But the Mediterranean diet, although it is reduced in dairy and meat, it still has enough dairy, meat, eggs to keep your cholesterol level elevated. Now, there was an advantage for the Mediterranean diet, and that was with blood pressure. Both groups had improved blood pressure, but here there was actually an advantage for the Mediterranean group. We don't know why, but we suspect that it might actually be an effect of polyphenols in the extra virgin olive oil. It's possible. Okay, now you might be thinking that Mediterranean diet's a waste of time. It doesn't really prevent heart disease very effectively. The effect is rather small. It doesn't cause weight loss at all. It won't bring my cholesterol down at all. But wait. The Predamed researchers in Spain looked at those 7,000 participants they had, and they said, some of you are assigned to the Mediterranean plus nuts group or plus oil group or the control group. But within this huge subject sample, I'll bet some of you are pretty much vegetarian or vegan just because you've interpreted the diet that way. And so they looked at who ate a lot of fruits and vegetables and nuts and who was eating very low meat or fish or dairy, or maybe avoiding those things completely. And they made what they called the pro-vegetarian scale for within whatever diet you were assigned to. Were you tending to really avoid the meats and the other animal products? And what they found was that all-cause mortality, dying from anything, would fall the more you got the animal products off your plate. So living in a Mediterranean country and eating Mediterranean foods, but that means pasta or beans or vegetables and fruits, and kind of leaving the meat out completely, your risk of dying was cut dramatically. And your risk specifically of cardiovascular mortality was cut dramatically too. And these figures were statistically significant, meaning it's very unlikely to be a chance finding. Okay, so a Mediterranean diet could be based on chickens, but why not have it be based on chickpeas? Because that way, instead of fat and cholesterol and no fiber, which you get from a chicken, with the chickpeas and the other vegetables and whole grains and beans that you find in a healthy diet, you'll get fiber, you won't get much of any fat, you won't get any cholesterol at all. So think of it this way. A vegan diet can mean Mediterranean foods, just minus all the animal products. Can also mean a Latin American diet. It can mean a Chinese style diet. It can mean a Japanese diet based on, say, a cucumber roll or a sweet potato roll or an asparagus roll. A vegan diet just means there's no animal products. It can be interpreted through any kind of cuisine that you want to, including Mediterranean if you like. Just set the animal products aside. And if you're doing Mediterranean, the best way, set the animal products aside. Choose all the plant products that you can eat. Okay, what's a healthy diet? Fruits, grains, legumes, vegetables. Don't forget your vitamin B12. You need that for healthy nerves and healthy blood. But now if you talk to a loved one about this, If you say to them, let's have a vegan breakfast, logic plays almost no role in human behavior. You know this is true. You're explaining to them that a vegan diet is really good, it's good for your weight, it's good for your health overall. Well, they're not listening. To plan their breakfast, they're basing it on the culture they grew up with or some kind of noise, meaning advertisements they saw on TV or whatever they're addicted to. And logic is not going to factor in very much. In fact, as you're talking to them, let me show you what happens inside their brain. You're saying a plant-based diet is really good, it's really healthy, you should try it. And the ideatron then gives them an idea, like maybe I should go vegan. But the idea irritates the famiglia. And the famiglia then triggers the don't do-atory gland to release endorphins. And that blots out that good idea within 20 seconds. Okay, what can you do instead if logic doesn't work? Well, here's what we do here at the Barnard Medical Center, which, by the way, just right down the hall from me here, our Barnard Medical Center is a primary care clinic where we do not only care for people who come in, but we also do telemedicine, including people in Sarasota who contact us and we see them, or our dietitians see them, or our doctors. Here's how we begin a healthy diet. And here's what I would do if I were you. If you're new to this, take a week and just check out the possibilities. The idea is not necessarily to go vegan right away. Let's give it 7 days to figure out what we would eat. So take a piece of paper, and on that paper, write breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack. Over the next 7 days, your homework is to fill out that piece of paper. Make a list of foods that you would eat if you were avoiding animal products. What could I have? Well, I guess I could have pancakes or oatmeal or scrambled tofu or whatever. I don't know. Let me take a few days. Let me try these different things. If I like it, I'm going to put it on my list. And when it comes to lunch, I guess I could have a veggie burger or a bean burrito or a veggie wrap or all kinds of things. In fact, different cuisines, as I was mentioning earlier, I could have pasta e fagioli. I could have pizza without cheese made with extra nutritional yeast that gives me all the cheesy flavor, but none of the regrets. Or Latin American cuisine, I could do that with veggie tacos or bean burritos or beans and rice. Chinese cuisine, good heavens, lots of rice dishes and vegetable dishes and tofu dishes. And Japanese cuisine, we've already talked about, lots of plant-based options. Okay, even fast food? Taco Bell is not the pinnacle of culinary art, but they do have you covered if you want something vegan. Just get the bean burrito and hold the cheese. Okay, a week has gone by and now you've got your list. And your list is pretty good. So the next step is to just do a 3-week test drive. We're going to go vegan. We're going to do it for 3 weeks, 21 days. And that's really easy now because you can do anything for 21 days and you've already got your list. So now we're going to really do it. No animal products at all for 3 weeks. If you do it that way, at the end of 21 days, 2 things will have happened. Number one, you'll discover that you're losing weight and you're feeling better. If you've got diabetes, your blood sugar is getting better. But you also discover that your tastes have changed. You haven't had chicken wings in 3 weeks and you discover you don't even really miss them too much, okay? Let me share with you a tool that you can use to make this easy. It's called the 21-Day Vegan Kickstart. This is an app on your iPhone or on your Android. It's free. It's in English and in Spanish. It's got menus, recipes, and cooking videos. Or take your phone. You can do this right now. Hit that QR code. Every patient who leaves Barnard Medical Center gets this little piece of paper, and we ask them to shoot that QR code because that brings them to foodinstructions.org. Foodinstructions.org has cute little videos that show you everything that you and I have just described, but in little kind of cartoon form to make it easy and non-threatening. That's foodinstructions.org. Let me stop by saying a big thank you to the organizers of today's event. I appreciate so much all that you're doing to make people happier, healthier, more compassionate, and hopefully ready to pass the message of health on to their loved ones. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dr. Barnard. Excellent.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if we have time for Q&A. We're going to see if there's one quick question. Okay, I don't think we can do Q&A, Dr. Barnard, but thank you so much.
All right. Good luck to you.
All right, thanks. Thank you again.